Good to see you in a new video on Betrayal Wife Tales. Today I'm going to tell you an interesting story of our subscriber.
It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. A week in the Mediterranean, just me and Rachel, my wife of 6 years, on our first real vacation together in years. Life had been hectic. We both worked demanding jobs, barely saw each other except for rushed dinners or quick goodnight kisses before collapsing into bed. We needed this break. Desperately. We arrived at a small coastal town in Greece, a place so picturesque it felt like stepping into a postcard. The clear blue water, the golden sand, the charming cobblestone streets lined with cafes. It was everything we'd dreamed of. From the moment we checked into our cozy seaside villa, I could feel the weight of the daily grind start to lift off my shoulders. Rachel seemed more relaxed than I'd seen her in ages. Her usual work-related stress and exhaustion faded as we sipped cocktails on the terrace, watching the sunset over the horizon. The first few days were perfect. We spent hours wandering through local markets, laughing at my terrible attempts to speak Greek and indulging in way too much wine. It was like we'd rediscovered each other. Rachel's smile was brighter, her laugh more frequent. I was sure this vacation was just what we needed to rekindle our connection. On the third night, we went out for a fancy dinner at a little restaurant that overlooked the sea. I remember it so clearly, the way the candlelight flickered across Rachel's face as she told me how much she loved me. I held her hand across the table, feeling like the luckiest man alive. We talked about everything we'd do once we got back home. Plans for the future, maybe even starting the family we'd always dreamed of. But something shifted that night. After dinner, we stopped at a beachside bar. It was one of those places filled with tourists, backpackers, and locals mingling over cheap drinks. Rachel and I found a spot at the bar, ordering cocktails and people-watching as the night unfolded. That's when she noticed him, a tall, tanned man sitting alone at the other end of the bar. He had that effortless charm, the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a travel magazine. I didn't think much of it at first. Rachel smiled at him when their eyes met, and I figured it was just the friendly atmosphere. But as the night went on, I noticed them exchanging glances more frequently, their gazes lingering a bit too long for comfort. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. This was Rachel, my wife. We were on vacation, reconnecting. There was no reason to be paranoid. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. The tension built slowly, like the faint rumble of distant thunder. Rachel kept glancing at him, and every time she did, I felt a tightening in my chest. I tried to ignore it, to push away the irrational jealousy that was starting to creep in. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Tell her to stop looking at the guy? That felt ridiculous. At one point, the man got up and walked past us, heading to the bar for another drink. He smiled at Rachel. No, he smirked, like they were in on some inside joke that I wasn't a part of. She smiled back, a little too brightly, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. Suddenly, the casual night out didn't feel so casual anymore. "Hey, you good?" I asked Rachel, trying to sound nonchalant. She blinked, her smile faltering for just a second. "Yeah, of course. Why?" I shrugged, playing it cool. "You just seem distracted." Rachel laughed, but there was an edge to it. "I'm just enjoying the night, babe. It's been a long time since we've had this much fun, right?" I forced a smile, nodding, even though my mind was buzzing with unease. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think this was just some harmless vacation flirting that didn't mean anything. We were happy, weren't we? As the night wore on, I noticed the man hadn't left. He lingered, always just close enough to catch Rachel's eye, but never too obvious. At one point, he leaned against the bar, pretending to focus on his drink, but I could see the way he was watching us, watching her. "I'm going to the bathroom," Rachel announced suddenly, getting up from her stool. "Want me to get us another round?" I asked, but she shook her head. "No, I'm good. Be right back." As I watched her walk away, That tight feeling in my chest turned into something colder, something more like dread. A few minutes passed, and then I saw him, the stranger, slip out of his seat and head in the same direction Rachel had gone. My heart started racing, each beat hammering in my ears. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just going to the bathroom too. I told myself that over and over, but I couldn't shake the suspicion gnawing at me. I waited, my eyes glued to the hallway, hoping she'd come back quickly, that this was all just in my head. But she didn't come back. Not right away. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the door, trying to convince myself not to follow. But I couldn't sit still anymore. I got up, my stomach in knots, and headed towards the bathrooms. That's when I saw them. Rachel and the man were standing close, too close, just outside the dimly lit hallway near the back of the bar. She was leaning against the wall, and he was standing in front of her, their faces inches apart. They weren't touching, yet, but the way they were looking at each other, the electricity between them, made my blood run cold. For a split second, I thought about turning around and pretending I hadn't seen anything. Maybe I could convince myself it was nothing, just a fluke, a trick of the light. But something inside me snapped, and before I knew it, I was walking toward them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Rachel!" I called out, my voice louder than I intended. She jumped, her eyes widening in surprise, guilt flashing across her face. The man took a step back, smirking like he didn't have a care in the world. "Jake, I was just talking," Rachel stammered, her voice shaky. I stood there, staring at Rachel and the stranger, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Just talking?" I repeated, my voice barely holding steady. Rachel bit her lip, glancing nervously between me and the man, who didn't seem the least bit fazed. He even had the audacity to shrug, as if I was overreacting. His smug grin made my blood boil. "Yeah," Rachel said, pushing herself off the wall and moving toward me. "We were just chatting. I ran into him at the bar and—" Her voice trailed off, her eyes pleading with me to believe her. But I could see through it. There was more to this, something she wasn't saying. "Right, just chatting." I shot a glare at the guy. He was still standing there, completely unfazed by the confrontation, which only made everything worse. "So, what exactly were you talking about?" I asked, folding my arms, trying to keep my voice calm, even though the tension was gnawing at me. Rachel hesitated, and in that pause, everything I had been trying to push down, the doubts, the jealousy, the fear, came rushing to the surface. "It's not what it looks like," she finally said, stepping closer, her hand reaching for mine. "I promise, Jake." But I could feel the space between us widening with each word she spoke. This wasn't just about the stranger in front of me. It was something deeper, something that had been festering for a while, even before this trip. I just hadn't wanted to see it. "You're lying," I whispered, the words slipping out before I could stop them. The look on Rachel's face told me everything I needed to know. Her silence, her hesitation. It was all unraveling right in front of me. The stranger cleared his throat, still watching the scene unfold like he was enjoying the show. "Look, man," he said, his voice low and condescending. "There's no need to make this a big deal. We were just having a good time. Relax." I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the urge to knock the smirk off his face. "You don't get to tell me to relax," I growled, taking a step toward him. "Why don't you back off?" He raised his hands in mock surrender, but the smug grin never left his face. All right. No need for drama." Drama. Like I was the one causing it. I could feel my pulse racing, anger boiling under my skin. But before I could say anything else, Rachel stepped between us, her eyes wide, desperate. "Jake, please," she said, her voice shaking now. "Let's just go. There's nothing happening here." "Isn't there?" I asked, my voice cold. Because from where I'm standing, it sure looks like something's happening. Rachel looked like she was on the verge of tears. Jake, don't do this. Not here. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her, waiting for her to say something, anything, that would make sense of this mess. But she didn't. She couldn't. The stranger, sensing that the moment was over, gave me one last look before turning and walking away, disappearing into the crowd of tourists without another word. But his presence lingered, like a stain on the night. Rachel looked at me, her face pale. Can we just go back to the villa? Please? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make sense of the betrayal that had just unfolded in front of me. But instead, I nodded, feeling hollow inside. We walked back to the villa in silence, the distance between us growing with every step. The excitement and intimacy of the past few days felt like a distant memory, as if they belonged to a different couple altogether. When we finally made it back, Rachel headed straight for the bathroom, locking herself inside without a word. I stood there, alone in the quiet of the villa, staring at the door, my mind racing. This was supposed to be our perfect getaway, our chance to reconnect. But now, everything felt broken. After what felt like an eternity, Rachel finally emerged, her eyes red, her face drawn. "I'm sorry," she whispered, standing in the doorway. "I don't know what I was thinking. It was a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "What happened, Rachel?" "I need to know." She hesitated again, wiping at her eyes. "We were flirting. It was stupid. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Did you sleep with him?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head quickly. "No, Jake. I swear, it didn't go that far." But something in her voice, in the way she couldn't quite meet my gaze, left me doubting. There was something more, something she wasn't telling me. And in that moment, I wasn't sure if I could ever trust her again. The silence in the villa was suffocating. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched in her lap, and I stood by the window, staring out at the dark ocean. The soft sound of the waves crashing against the shore should have been calming, but all I could feel was the storm brewing inside me. "Jake," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking the silence. "I swear nothing happened. It was just stupid flirting. It didn't mean anything." I turned around slowly, my chest tight. "Flirting?" "Rachel, I saw the way you looked at him. That wasn't just flirting. You're lying to me, and you know it." She flinched, her eyes darting away from mine, and I could feel the distance between us growing, like a canyon that had opened up overnight. I could sense the cracks in her story, the hesitation in her voice. "I didn't sleep with him," she repeated, her voice trembling now. "I promise." "But you wanted to, didn't you?" The words came out before I could stop them, and I saw the flash of guilt in her eyes. It was like a punch to the gut. Rachel looked down, her hands twisting nervously. "I don't know," she whispered. Maybe I got caught up in the moment. He was just there. And you—" "Me?" I snapped, cutting her off. "What about me, Rachel?" "I'm here. I've been here, trying to make this work, trying to reconnect with you. And you've been distracted, acting like I'm invisible. And now this?" I gestured vaguely, feeling the anger building inside me again. "What the hell was that?" She stood up then, pacing across the room, her hands pulling at her hair in frustration. "I don't know, okay? I don't know what's wrong with me. I've been feeling off, distant. And this trip, it was supposed to fix everything, but it hasn't." Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "Off," I repeated. You're feeling off, so you almost sleep with some random guy in a bar. That's your solution? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't feeling any sympathy. Not now. It's not like that, Jake. I don't know how to explain it, but I felt disconnected for a while now. From you. From us. My heart sank. Disconnected? So instead of talking to me, you start flirting with another guy? How long has this been going on, Rachel? Her silence told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just about tonight. There had been something wrong for a long time, and I had been too blind to see it. I should have said something sooner, Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. I've been trying to push it down, trying to act like everything's fine. But it's not. And tonight, I don't know. It just happened. Just happened. I shook my head, feeling the anger bubbling up again. Things like this don't just happen, Rachel. You made a choice. You decided to go down that path. And for what? Because you're bored? Because you're feeling off? She sank back onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted it to get this far. But it did, I said, my voice cold. And now I don't know what to believe. How can I trust you after this? She didn't have an answer. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive, until I couldn't stand it anymore. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my jacket from the chair and heading for the door. Jake, please, Rachel called after me, her voice desperate. But I couldn't face her right now. I couldn't look at her without feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. I stepped out into the night, the cool breeze hitting my face as I walked toward the beach. My mind was spinning, replaying everything that had happened, everything Rachel had said. How had we gotten here? How had I missed all the signs? I sat down on the sand, staring out at the dark waves crashing against the shore. This vacation was supposed to bring us back together, but instead, it had revealed just how far apart we really were. I had thought we were reconnecting, that this trip was a chance to fix what had been broken. But the truth was, the cracks had been there long before we ever boarded the plane. And now, I didn't know if we could ever repair the damage. As I sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on me, I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Rachel. She sat down beside me, but I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice soft and full of regret. I never wanted this to happen. I stared at the waves, my jaw clenched. You've said that already. I know. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the tears in her words. But I mean it, Jake. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I turned to face her then, my eyes searching hers. Then why, Rachel? Why did you do this? She looked down, her shoulders slumping. I don't know. Maybe I've been feeling lost, like I'm drifting. And tonight? It was like I wanted to feel something again, to feel alive. Her words hit me hard, but there was no comfort in them. I didn't know what to say, how to make sense of it all. Is this it, then? I asked, my voice hoarse. Are we done? Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I don't want us to be. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, the only thing filling the space between us. I couldn't look at her anymore, not without feeling the sting of betrayal, the weight of what she'd done pressing down on me like a suffocating blanket. Rachel was the love of my life, the woman I'd vowed to spend forever with. And now she was a stranger sitting next to me on a beach thousands of miles away from home, telling me she didn't know why she'd risked everything we'd built. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I whispered, my voice raw. Rachel flinched, her face crumpling as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. Jake, please don't say that. What do you expect me to say? I snapped, the frustration bubbling over. You flirt with some random guy in front of me, then tell me you've been feeling lost, and now I'm supposed to just... What? Pretend like none of it happened? She shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Number, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I still love you, Jake. I don't want to throw everything away over one mistake. One mistake? I repeated, incredulous. This is more than just a mistake, Rachel. This is a crack in everything I thought we were. How do I know it won't happen again? How do I know this wasn't just the first time I caught you? Her eyes widened, a flash of panic crossing her face. Jake, no. It's not like that. I've never done anything like this before, I swear. I looked away, my chest tight. I want to believe you. God, I want to. But right now, I don't even know who you are anymore. The truth hung in the air between us, heavy and painful. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. The woman I had fallen in love with, the one I had built a life with, felt so distant now. How had we gotten here? After a long silence, Rachel spoke again, her voice soft, barely audible. I don't know how we fix this, Jake, but I want to try. I want to fight for us. I closed my eyes, the weight of her words sinking in. I wanted to believe her, to believe that we could come back from this, that this wasn't the end of everything we had worked for. But deep down, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to keep fighting for something that felt so broken. You say you want to fight, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But you didn't think about fighting for us when you were flirting with him, did you? Rachel's breath hitched, and I could see the guilt etched into her face. I wasn't thinking, she admitted, her voice trembling. I was just lost, and I didn't know how to find my way back to you. Her words twisted something inside me. She was being honest, vulnerable, and part of me wanted to pull her close, to tell her that we'd figure it out, that we'd fix what was broken. But the other part of me, the part that had seen her with that man, the part that had felt the sharp stab of betrayal, was too raw, too angry. I need space, I finally said, my voice steady but hollow. I need time to figure out if I can forgive this. Rachel's face crumpled, her tears flowing freely now. Jake, please, don't walk away. Don't leave me like this. I stood up, feeling the cool sand shift beneath my feet as I turned toward the villa. I'm not leaving, I said quietly, but I need to be alone right now. Without waiting for her response, I walked back toward the villa, the night air cool against my skin. Each step felt heavy, like I was dragging the weight of our entire relationship with me. When I reached the villa, I didn't go inside. Instead, I sat on the small terrace, staring out at the ocean, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. I thought back to the beginning, to when Rachel and I had first fallen in love. We had been inseparable, sharing dreams, plans, and promises. We had been so certain that we were unbreakable. And now it felt like everything was falling apart, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. After a while, I heard the door creak open behind me. Rachel stepped out, her face streaked with tears, her shoulders slumped. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, she whispered, her voice barely holding together. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to say anything without letting the anger and hurt spill out all over again. She stood there for a moment, waiting for something, maybe for me to stop her, maybe for some sign that there was still hope. But I had nothing to give her. Not tonight. Rachel finally turned and went inside, leaving me alone with the crashing waves and the echo of everything we had lost. The next morning, the villa was quiet. Rachel had already packed her things, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Jake, I'm going to give you the space you need. I'm sorry for everything. I love you, and I'll be waiting if you decide you still want me. But if this is the end, I'll understand. R. I stared at the note, the familiar ache in my chest returning. This wasn't how things were supposed to end, but maybe it had been heading this way for a long time, and I had just refused to see it. I packed up my things and left the villa later that day. As I drove away, the memories of our trip, the good and the bad, swirled together in my mind, a confusing mess of emotions that I couldn't untangle. Maybe in time, I'd figure it out. Maybe we'd figure it out together. Or maybe this was the end of our story.